welcome to Books in the World, a production of Cape Cod Writers Center. And we are delighted today to have not just one, but two very talented Cape Cod artists, authors, writers. They just have so many talents, and musicians. So today we welcome Christina Laurie and Elizabeth Moisan. And I don't know where to begin. They have done so many things. But I'm going to let each of them just give you a few words about themselves. If you'd like to go first, Elizabeth.
Well, I'm an artist, and I always tell people I was born that way, and I'm third generation professional. Next year, I will celebrate 50 years as a professional artist.
Wow.
And I'm planning a retrospective. Already have the Blue Room at the Cultural Center set up. And I'm the illustrator of Christina's book. And I've done many, many things. My major career has been designing carpets in New York City and also in Boston for high-end market. That means to the decorators only, generally. It's not retail, and in that sense. And I've always wanted to illustrate. I did go to Parsons School of Design, and many years ago. And I've done quite a bit of, like I said, carpet design, but I've also done other things. I've done set design and portraits and a good deal of calligraphy, and a lot of book covers for a variety of people. And when the Great Recession crushed the home furnishings industry, I worked freelance for a while until my boss stopped manufacturing, and then I started to finally get some illustration done. And I'm got three more jobs for clients and hope to retire when that's over, and I've got my life mapped out. I've got so many projects, two more novels to write, and a whole bunch of my own kids' books to do.
And when I first met you, you were on stage creating music.
Well, yes, that's also been a major part of my life, all of my life. I play with a folk group. We're a bunch of old folkies. We're all over 70. We remember the old days. And I also play and sing at O'Shea's Irish Pub in West Dennis on Wednesdays and Sundays. And of course, I've sung in church choirs all of my life, but at heart I've been a folk musician since 1961. So, yeah. And of course, I've also written a novel, and I intend to write my own kids' books once I'm retired. Retired.
You'll never retire.
from hiring myself out to other people. Right. So this is technically the last book I will do for someone else.
Wow. So we'll show your book later.
Okay.
And if you'd like to say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, I started writing when I was about 10, I guess, and running into the woods with my little yellow pad and pencil. I had published haiku since college, and I won my first haiku prize back in 1976, and have been publishing haiku since then. I've got a book out on haiku, and also another poetry book out, which I've been writing a lot of. So that's part of my writing, and sometimes they come in the middle of the night, and I turn on the light and write it down, or inspiration comes all different ways. But I've started writing children's books when my grandchildren were little, and I would say, okay, now let's start writing a book. What are we going to talk about? Who's going to be the hero? Who's going to be the heroine? Where's the setting? And we created books as we were driving in the car or something like that. So that's where the creation started. And then they started writing books and illustrating, none of which had been published. But I started writing books, children's books for them. And my first book that was published was the ABC books. C is for Cape Cod. And this book, I started the Lobster's Night Before Christmas. I started writing about 10 years ago, and looked for someone to illustrate it, and went to SCBWI and looked at all the illustrators and talked to them, and nobody, even people who drew ocean pictures didn't want to do lobsters. So I went to Liz and I said, can you draw lobsters? And she said, I can draw anything, and she can. She really can. So she has become my illustrator, and it's been a wonderful dual work together. I've just loved working with her, and I'm very sorry she's not going to do any more children's books.
Well, I am, but not for other people.
Mine.
Not even for yours.
I know.
Well, this is the most charming book I've read in a long time.
Thank you.
Because the illustrations and the story just weave together with such magic, really. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the things that you've done are beautiful, but I found this one, I was thinking of a small child experiencing this book and how special it would be, even in the way that the illustrations fill the covers, and you have this Christmas tree, and it's a book about Christmas under the sea, and it was just fascinating to me. Of course, my child self is alive and well and kicking all the time, but I thought it was just the sort of book that a child would be so fascinated by, and they would remember these. This I found interesting. I never knew what these skates were about, so you described that, and then I said, well, that's what they are. So it's wonderful.
The skate cases were hung on the reef with care,
Yeah.
in hopes that Sea Santa soon would be there.
Yeah. And the illustrations have such a sort of ethereal quality to them.
Well, I think Under the Water is rather ethereal,
Yeah,
isn't
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and of course the lobsters are not, what do you call those, biological type drawings. You know, I mean, like a scientific drawings.
Yeah.
They're
They're very
anthropomorphized.
cuddly-looking lobsters.
And they're not red.
And they're not red.
Because they're not
You know, when you look up lobster illustrations, if you Google that, 99 and 44/100% of all those illustrations, the lobsters are red, and they're highly animated. They're doing all kinds of stuff, you know, including dancing along.
Yeah.
But red lobsters are dead lobsters.
They're cooked.
They're cooked.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, why would
I know,
somebody?
it's not logical at all.
No, it isn't.
And if you live by the sea, as all of us do,
Yes.
and you've seen the lobsters being pulled up in the nets, you know they're not red.
No, they're not.
They're all different colors: blue,
Yeah.
white, yellow,
All
even
kinds of colors,
green.
greenish brown,
Yeah,
right.
some model
Right,
shows. And you know, even now, even before I did your book, I felt so sorry for the lobsters in the grocery store. You know how they have the tank and they're all piled up like in a
Yeah.
corner. I always walk by like this.
I know, it's so sad.
I
really.
can't even look.
Yeah.
And now I couldn't. I just, you know.
Now they're your
it's
friends,
especially after this book.
I always apologize to lobsters when I drop them in the pot.
Oh, I could never do
And
it.
then
Oh
I
my
say,
God, you cook them yourself?
I do, and then I thank them. In the back, there's
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was very informative.
a lot of information about lobsters
Yeah.
that one of the scientists at Woods Hole, Yeli Atima, helped me with. So that's tells you the different colors of the lobsters,
So
among
we
other
won't
things.
castigate you for putting lobsters in the water.
can you
We're going to
stand
ignore you said that.
My mother stopped cooking lobsters when she was really aware of the clacking inside the pot. I mean,
Oh, yeah, well, I leave the kitchen after that.
oh my God, you're a murderer.
I'm a
So
murderer.
while we're on the topic, just so we don't forget, this is Elizabeth's first book,
Yes.
and fascinating also. Cape Cod history, mystery, and
Wonderful book.
yep,
Great, very beautifully written.
yep.
So.
I told you these people are just so talented. And then we have the first book written, or the first children's book written by Christina. And I never knew how much I didn't know about the place I live. This has so much information. When I saw the cover, I said, well, it's nice if you have a small one to teach the alphabet. But
Well, it has a 4-line poem too that young
Yeah.
kids can read. So that's
Yeah.
as well as all the information and a great pictures done by Steve Hazlett from the Cape Cod Times.
oh,
so.
beautiful pictures.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite
Yeah.
photographers. He's done so many nice photos of my dance troupe.
Yeah,
Really fabulous.
creative eye.
Yep.
Well, Elizabeth has a very creative eye too.
Yes, indeed, she does.
So
So I was interested in how many different things both of you have done, and I was surprised to read that you had been a minister for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I started out as a newspaper writer, which gave me my training really as a writer. But then I also, when I was 46, I went back to seminary and studied theology and women's studies, and became a pastor in Methodist churches in Rhode Island and Connecticut and Massachusetts, and did that for a dozen years. And then I left the pastorship and became a chaplain for hospice, which was really close to my heart and something that I really enjoyed doing. Did that for a while. And then, of course, when I came down to the Cape, I started writing. So I've done a number of features for prime time and writing all different kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but I love being a pastor. But it's tough work, and I want to say, please appreciate your pastors. I think it's Pastor Appreciation Month or something this month, and pastors
really?
do so much work behind the scene that you never know about.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
really,
I think it's that way with a lot of professions. People think, well, that's an easy job. What do they do?
they work Sundays.
And if somebody has a crisis, you can't say, sorry, I'll see you on Sunday. You know.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking of Elizabeth, your book connects so well with our two widow museums that we have now.
Oh, yes, yes.
And
Yes, they're stocked in both museums, one
Yeah.
in Yarmouth and the one in
Mhm.
Provincetown. And the thing about writing historical fiction about a person like Sam Bellamy is that he didn't leave a paper trail. I mean, if you want to write a biography of Benjamin Franklin, for example, I mean, he wrote stuff all the time, and you've got letters and things.
Yeah, right.
But there's nothing from Bellamy. I mean, there's every reason to assume he was literate. But if there was any, a ship's log or anything that went down with the widow, it's hasn't been discovered or it's dissolved
Yeah. Right.
years ago.
Right.
He wrote no letters that anybody knows of. So history is mostly written. In fact, the historians Will and Ariel Durant say history is mostly prejudice. No, I'm not going to remember this quote. And the rest is guessing. I think it's something like that, prejudice.
Yeah.
And you say history is written by the winners. It's also written by the losers, and mostly history is point of view.
yes.
Even now, with all our technical
Mhm.
way of recording things live, as you know very well, all kind of things can be edited and
Oh, of
taped.
course, you can put a spin on anything and turn it into a whole
So you
different
don't
story.
know whether your news is really news or it's been diddled by somebody or
Yeah,
fake,
we hear a lot about
even
this now.
fake news, right? So history is a very tenuous thing.
Yes,
and,
it is.
But in writing historical fiction, you have to take what you know or what is generally assumed and just build it into a story.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they gave me a timeline, and I chose events that were recorded historically with the above caveat and
Yeah.
built my story around that.
Mhm.
You get to make up conversations, and
Yes.
of course there are fictional people in the
Yeah.
book too.
You do have to get your dates right, though.
You
I
do
have
have
to
to
do-
stick
get
to
the
the
dates
facts.
The dates,
Yeah.
right. The other
Yeah.
thing you
Yeah.
have to do when you're writing historical fiction is make sure people don't say things like "oh shucks" or
Yes.
you
Yeah.
have to keep your
Yes.
idioms to the time period that you're writing in.
It's my favorite genre, historical fiction.
Hmm?
It's my favorite genre.
Oh, is it really?
It's
maybe you'll write
you learn
something.
so much about a culture through
Mm-hmm.
historical fiction.
Well, it's a culture, in this case, is Cape Cod history, which I really enjoy.
Mhm.
And I love the sea and sea stories and things.
Yeah.
So it kind of fit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, do I dare ask what the two of you are up to next? I know I don't like being asked, when's your next book? Because it's like
Well.
you're coming out of the delivery room and people saying, when are you going to have another one? I don't like
Sounds
that.
like a grandparent. My next project actually is pretty much in the running. I spent the summer reading 12 novels and all kinds of information on a suffragette woman called Lucretia Coffin Mott, and she was born in Nantucket, and she is an ancestor of mine. And she was born in 1793, died in 1880, and was one of, I think, the major woman who started out the suffragette movement. She was also an abolitionist and a fascinating woman, wonderful speaker, traveled all over the country, even in her 70s and 80s. So that's my project right now, and I've just finished doing the research, and I'm in the process of outlining the book. It's a children's middle grade book.
Are there a lot of novels about Lucretia Mott?
There are not many children's novels. There's two. One is relatively inaccurate, was written back in the 40s. The other one is very well done, but it's not geared to children. It's really an adult
Well, I mean, you
book.
said you were reading novels for
There's
research.
a lot of
Is there a
information
lot
that's out on Lucretia. A lot of it comes from the Nantucket Athenaeum, and there's some in Philadelphia, and of course she lived on Nantucket, so they're pretty much there. I had 12 books that I used for reading about it, and they were all said a lot of the same thing, but every once in a while I'd pick up a little tidbit in one or another that was kind of interesting, and I'd copious notes. So yeah.
And she's your ancestor.
Yes, she on my dad's side. Yep.
That's so
A
interesting.
Mott.
So those rebellious genes, you carry them.
Yes, she was a writer too. She did write some, but mostly she was public speaking.
Does she come up in your 23andMe profile?
I don't know.
Oh, you should get it done.
I don't know about that.
That'd be fun. As I found some of mine were part of the Irish Rebellion.
I check it out. She certainly was in the rebellion against slavery and against women being put down. As a Quaker, she believed that the light of God was in every person, and that every person had worth, and that included the slaves. And she was very, very adamant about the slaves should be freed, and women should have the same rights as men, same pay. Does that
you
sound
should be
familiar?
very, very proud of your ancestor.
Yeah,
That will be a fun project.
it is. It's been fun getting to know her.
And besides retirement, what other projects are you coming up on? I know you keep saying you're retiring. You have too much creativity there.
Eventually, I would like to work on the sequel to this book. And
Great.
I can't wait to read
one
it.
character remains at the end, and I'm going to bring her into the second book. I've also worked on another historical novel that takes place during the First World War. I had great delusions of getting it done by 2014, and then I said, okay, by 2018, and that didn't work either. So somewhere along the line, this World War I book will come out, and I've got about 13 or 14 children's books I want to work on.
Wow.
That's a lot.
It is. Well, five
You
of
see it
them
lined
five
up
of
in the
them-
library.
5 of them are in a series. I have 3 done, and fourth one I'm working on, and I just want to do one more in that series. And the rest are just freestanding books that I want to write and illustrate myself. And I want to experiment with other media in my illustrations. I use mostly it's graphite and watercolor, but I don't want to limit myself to that now. Because when you're working only for yourself, you get to make all the decisions. But when you're working with someone, either an author or your boss in the carpet world, I mean, there's always somebody who's going to say, not this way, that way.
Yes.
Well, look, Christina was really wonderful.
Yeah, we
She
worked
was
very well
wonderful.
together.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
just it was a smooth effort. It really was.
Well, it actually shows in the book.
Does it really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
There's some
Every time
beautiful
I
melding of your energies.
well,
in
we
the
did
book.
that. Yeah, I think that's good. Every time I read this book, I giggle. And as we were going through the storybook and the pages and her illustrations, as they came out more and more from the drawing to the pencil color to the watercolors, I giggled all the time.
Yeah.
And I just I'd go back to when I needed a laugh. I'd go plug it into my computer and just sit there and read it and giggle. I loved it. It's been fun.
Yeah. So we don't have an awful lot of time left, but if you could give me some estimate of how many hours a day you dedicate to your writing, when you're in the midst of a project? I know you need a break in between, but
Oh my gosh, this summer when I was working on Lucretia, I spent about 5 or 6 hours a day on my bed just reading and taking notes, and I had it all spread out all over my bed. But I'm very erratic, mostly in my writing. I try Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to put aside for writing and write some kind of writing work. But I do also work at night. And so, but it comes and goes,
yeah,
and
everyone has
especially
a
with
different
poetry.
hour that works. When
Well,
do you
there's
do
one
yours?
thing when we were working on this book, we often spoke at about 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night.
Really?
I'm a night owl.
Oh, that's right, you're a
I
night owl as
love
well,
working
yeah.
at night, but I too am rather erratic about it. I think
It's
the
the
difference
artistic
is
temperament, isn't it?
well,
Yeah, partly.
no, I don't know,
think so.
because all of my life, my work has been a job. It's
Yeah.
not a muse-inspired burst of energy. It's somebody has hired me to do something,
But now you won't
so
have
I
that.
do it.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think
Do it
sometimes
your way.
if, when I'm on my own like that, am I going to have the same discipline, knowing that there isn't
Discipline.
a deadline or somebody waiting for
Yeah.
me or a
But your
publisher?
cat,
Mike, what?
your cat will show up at the computer
Oh, he
on time.
doesn't pay attention to
Really?
me. No, I mean, he comes up sometimes.
Because mine
but
shows up ready to write.
That's my muse. She sits on it. The Holy Spirit works through me. I have 2 words in my writing. One is discipline, that you mentioned. The other one is procrastination. And I work really hard at procrastinating and trying not to procrastinate. That's really the
Well,
antagonist
that's
in
a
my
tough
life.
one,
It is.
procrastinating. But
Yep.
when, like I said, when someone else is handing you the deadline, you
Yeah.
really don't have that much wiggle room.
Yeah.
With my book, it was my deadline, and I kept saying, I'll never make that, so we'll make it another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
make that, make it another 2 weeks. So
Yeah, giving
we'll see.
oneself a deadline is difficult. That's what I
good.
do as well.
It's good,
I'll
yeah.
say by the 1st of this month, I'm going to have this ready for whatever the next step is.
But
But
you
I
can
write
always,
at 11 every day.
can always
11
move
in the
your own
morning.
deadline. You
Well,
can't,
that's the
can't move
bad
other
part about it.
people's.
You keep moving the deadline, the book never
Yes.
gets born. Yeah, it's
Well,
different.
we'll see. I mean, I look forward to it. I really do. For the
Well,
first time
so
in
do
my
we.
life,
Yeah.
really working without
Yeah,
someone else's.
it'll be very gratifying for you.
I hope so. Yes, it will. It will. It'll be really wonderful.
And publishers always have deadlines too. So we have to have the storyboard in by such and such time. We want the pictures by the such and such a time. And they had accepted my writing, for the book, and so there was a lot more deadlines with Elizabeth than there was with mine. But then we had the proofs, and we had to make sure that everything was right, and then the instruction page at the end was. So we had a lot of deadlines.
Well, you don't have time for this, but there is the difference there between being picked up by a traditional house
Yes.
versus self-publishing,
Yeah.
which I intend to do.
I much prefer self-publishing.
So do I. I mean, for all the
Yeah.
books that I want to do that are coming up, I will self-publish them.
Yeah.
And Christina has worked so hard on organizing lists and stuff. I tell everybody she's like a chipmunk on speed. She's just going. And I'm thinking, oh my God.
Only on
she's
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
She's back with another list. And it's
Well,
Well, I get that organization too.
well, I'm not very organized for a Virgo. I have to say that.
Well, it's a deadline thing too. As a newspaper writer,
Right.
I had
Yeah,
deadlines. I always
of
had to
course.
get it going and going. So that
Yeah.
also.
self-imposed deadlines
Yep.
are a different story. You can't be
are.
too lenient with yourself and say,
Well,
oh,
that's
you weren't feeling
true.
well. So.
But I think it's nice to. I'm looking forward to the freedom,
Yeah.
experimenting with another media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to try pastels and, but not traditional. I will never do a landscape. I'm not a landscape
Yeah.
Or rugs.
waterscape people.
Yeah.
No more rugs.
But the rugs, there's such a tradition in the Middle East with the creating of the rugs, the story of a family, of a tribe, of a generation.
Well, actually,
Rugs are
one
so
of the kids'
interesting.
books I want to do is about how a rug is created.
Yeah.
But I'm not having human characters. They
Mm-hmm.
are sheep who get dressed up in
yeah.
people's clothes, and
Sure.
the book is called Follow the Fleece, and they go, they're shorn. They wonder one day where their wool goes to. So they start
it's
sneaking
fun.
around and
Yeah.
following, and this will take you through the whole, it's cottage industry over in the Himalayas, and so you watch how the yarn, the wool gets cleaned and carded
Yeah,
and
it's quite a
spun and
process.
dyed
Yeah.
and woven, and then where does the rug go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It ends up in
great.
somebody's living room in the United States. So
Yeah.
they follow the whole thing, follow the fleece.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's true everywhere, but in the Middle East, where I've lived and I've watched the rugs being made, there's always a small flaw worked into the rug because only Allah is perfect. So there has to be a flaw somewhere in that rug.
Well,
Interesting.
I don't know that we ever put flaws in on purpose. They occur.
Yeah.
They
yeah.
just occur.
But you don't fret over it and say,
You
oh,
don't-
that
no,
shouldn't
no,
have
no.
happened.
I mean,
That's-
you have always had to tell the end user it's handmade.
yes, and they're
It is
so
not
beautiful.
going to look like a
Yeah.
machine-made carpet. It's
Yeah.
handmade. There are
Nice.
little
Yeah.
things that happen
Yeah.
all through the construction of
Yeah.
the rug.
I think that would be a very interesting thing to do, designing rugs. Well, aren't we just so creative here? You know, I'm always amazed, the more people I meet on Cape Cod, how much talent is in this one little strip
Yep.
of land. It reminds me of Ireland, when you think of how much incredible talent has come out of that little country in all of the arts. So we
Yeah.
have that here on Cape
We
Cod.
do.
This
Yep.
is not at all the conservative little village that people from far away think of.
I get friends who come down in the summertime. What do you do in the winter? And I said,
That's a
Where
busy
we
time.
live.
Yeah.
We get to the corner and make a left-hand turn is what we do in the winter.
exactly.
Well, this has been such fun. You're
Thank
two of
you.
my favorite artists on the Cape. And
Oh,
have them
thank you,
both of you
Katrina.
here
Thank
today.
It's been
So
fun.
good luck with your new projects. and
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon. Thank you.